Brighton and Hove Albion are progressing in the Premier League in a very remarkable way. This was surprising not too long ago, but maybe it shouldn't be anymore. The Seagulls had their best ever season in the 22-23 year, finishing 6th and heading to Europe for the first time in their 122-year history. It's a special moment, and it looks like they're on course to keep it up. The highest scoring team in the league after 6 games of the new year, and one of the most direct transitional and attacking teams that the league has to offer. 27 points. That's what they've managed to claim from Chelsea, Manchester City, Manchester United, Liverpool, Newcastle United, and Arsenal since the start of last season. And while doing so, they've sold off their quote-unquote best players and look to be doing just fine without them. How did a team that was in the 2nd division in 2017 and the 3rd as recently as 2011 become a bully to English football's so-called elite? What's going on, everyone? Hope you're all doing well. I'm Tinashe, welcome back to the channel. Brighton are a truly unique team. Given how the last few years have gone, it's no wonder the fan base like what they see. Before the current season began, The Athletic polled their users to see just how much hope each fan base had for their team going into the season. The results were not surprising, with Brighton ranking amongst the best, with 95% of their fan base being optimistic. If you're a fan of comedy, Chelsea are right behind them. Unfortunately, as we have all learned, you can't just buy a team's entire stock and expect to acquire the secret sauce.
I want my money back now. I want my money back. I'm getting serious now. I want my fucking money back. Is the money back?
Before 2017, Brighton were going on 34 years without top-flight football. They've been in one FA Cup final in their entire history in 1983, which they did not win, and have yet to win any major silverware. In those 34 years, they were pretty much just bouncing from division to division, all while narrowly avoiding financial ruin. When they came second in the 16-17 season of the Championship to gain promotion, it was a big moment, but not necessarily a moment that many thought would last too long, because why would they? They did finish 1 point behind Newcastle to gain promotion in the first place, but still. This was a tale that we've all seen play out before. At best, many viewed this team as a team that would be in and out of the Premier League perpetually. You know, a Bournemouth type, a Sunderland type. Nothing wrong with that, but let's be real. The game is the game. In 2022, they recorded 5 consecutive years in the Premier League. That's more than they've ever managed in the country's highest division in their entire history, which is a pretty impressive achievement and brings up a relevant question. How do they do that? Well, there are a couple of reasons. Ownership. Tony Bloom, Brighton's owner, is not only rich, he's not only competent, but he's also a lifelong Seagulls fan. This is also a guy that very clearly understands the boundaries between ownership, management, and everything in between. We're fairly fluid in when we communicate, and I get on a personal level, extremely well with Roberto. He doesn't agree with everything that I say, or all of the ideas I've got, and I don't necessarily agree with the ideas he's got, but that doesn't matter. When it comes to football and his squad of players and his team and his tactics, he obviously does everything he wants. With all that in mind, it's unsurprising that this man is fully on board with the long-term project. Between 2009, when he took over, and 2022, the latest publicly available books, he has provided Brighton with just under £500 million worth of funding. Coaching. Graham Potter succeeded Chris Hughton in 2019. His possession-based, fluid, high-pressing, attacking style of football worked wonders. Brighton was a team that always looked to create chances and score goals, and they weren't afraid to take risks. And Potter did well in developing young players, something he gained a lot of appreciation for. Brighton clearly did their homework because Roberto De Zerbi's tactics and persona aren't too far off from that. Historically, at least. Short passing, high pressing, and intense. He is a student of Pep Guardiola and Marcelo Bielsa, after all. He studied training sessions from the latter when he was at Lille, and the former when he was at both Barcelona and Bayern Munich. Their current playstyle is something that seems to be very subtly evolving, but still hasn't been completely figured out by the rest of the league. They lure the opponent in, and in an instant, they turn on. Next thing you know, they're in the final third. Manchester United are amongst those teams that are still very confused. United have failed to win in any of the last 5 matches that they've played against Brighton in all competitions in regular time. They beat them on penalties in last year's FA Cup semi-final, but lost every other match outright with an aggregate score of 10-2. Splendid. There were maybe about 10 to 15 minutes when United had the upper hand in their most recent clash, but after that, it was pretty much all blue and white. They dominated possession, they dominated the tempo. United just kept playing into their hands. Against Bournemouth, the fighting spirits of a team willing to right the wrongs of an individual era were on display. Kaoru Mitoma came off the bench to secure a 3-1 win from a losing position after the new number 1, Bart Verbruggen, was pressured into a mistake. And Brighton were extremely fluid, calm and collected in how they rescued those 3 points. In the words of Adam Lallana when talking about Roberto De Zerbi, he just made football make so much more sense to me since he's been here. This is a man that won the Champions League and the Premier League with Jurgen Klopp's Liverpool. He might be saying those things just to big up his current manager, but at the same time, he doesn't need to. People are always talking about how good Brighton are at finding new players, and listen, they've got a solid scouting department, there's no doubt about that, but I'm gonna offer a little bit of pushback to that. They pick players who fit their style and strength, but let's not lie. It's not like they're spotting talent that nobody else is looking at. Moises Caicedo was very well known in his early days in Ecuador and was pretty much being monitored by a lot of clubs. Kaoru Mitoma was one of the best talents in Japan and was, in his early 20s already. Evan Ferguson could have joined any Premier League club's academy if he really wanted to. He rejected Liverpool, Man United, and Everton in favor of Brighton. Basuma was very well known and monitored in France when he was playing for Lille. I find it hard to imagine that players like Trossard, Cucurella, and Ciso, etc. didn't have teams monitoring them. Where Brighton probably has the edge is that they're far more likely to offer patience and stick to their word. You're not really going to be competing against a mega signing in this club because they don't really make mega signings. The idea is that you become the mega signing. Add in the fact that their 2 most recent managers have a knack for tinkering with their team every week, and it becomes clear that minutes will likely come your way if you work hard. Which brings us to the next point. Brighton's recruitment is good, but what's really good and what's probably their best trait is their culture, a culture that keeps evolving. For the second year in a row, they've lost a number of crucial club figures and look even better than they did before. A lot more balanced than many probably expected. In the Man United match, James Milner, João Pedro, Billy Gilmore, Evan Ferguson, and Ansu Fati all came on as subs. Just about all those players could have easily started in that match, and just about all those players have already started this season or will start in the games to come. Goalkeeper Jason Steele summed this up quite nicely when talking about the sales of McAllister and Caicedo. Did we lose our 2 best players in the summer? Probably, yes. Does that open a pathway and an opportunity for somebody else? Absolutely. Whoever comes into the team, the group, is coming into a culture that's been formed for a while. A culture that is the best I've ever experienced in my life. Nobody is above anybody else. Nobody is an outright superstar. Everybody works for the team. Brighton have already proven that they're not afraid of the elite on the pitch, but off the pitch, it's gonna be a little bit more difficult to close the gap there. In 21-22, they were 13th when it came to revenue in the Premier League, about £450 million off Manchester City at the top. Even still, there's a lot to be optimistic about. Remember, we're still talking about the 21-22 season where they finished 9th. The figures for the 22-23 season where they finished 6th aren't actually out yet, but I'm pretty sure they're going to echo exactly what I'm about to say. Records when it comes to club revenue, player sales, and profit. Notwithstanding any crazy financial decisions, this club should be in the green for a long time. Over the past 2 seasons, they've recorded the highest transfer net balance of any team in the Premier League, almost double that of the team in 2nd place, relegated Leicester City. And of course we have the sum they received for Graham Potter to break his contract and move over to Chelsea, £20 million, only the 2nd highest amount that's being paid for a manager to move teams. Because this is a never-ending story, we now move on to the current squad players that are most definitely being monitored by the whales of world football. Kaoru Mitoma, who cost them just under £3 million, and Evan Ferguson, who is an academy graduate, come to mind immediately. I don't see either of these players going for less than 50 M's when or if it's their time to go. In the case of Evan Ferguson, who's only 18 years old and will be homegrown by the time he goes, I'm pretty sure that number is going to go into the 9-figure range. Of course, it depends on how he develops. Newcastle United have already felt the full force of the guy. They won't be the last. But this brings us to the point of the video where we have to ground ourselves in reality. It's pretty important that we recognize what's really going on here. Brighton are a very exciting team to watch and somehow have managed to steadily get better and better. Judging by how things are like right now, it's pretty easy to fall into the trap of thinking that things will be like this forever. But the obvious caveats apply here. Do they have a squad strong and expansive enough to have them competing on all fronts all year? The Premier League, the FA Cup, the Europa League, the Carabao Cup? Probably not, but decent runs in any of those competitions will probably be enough. Decent can mean anything to anyone, but to me, decent I guess means getting past the group stages in Europa. I think that's pretty good. What about the league? How far can they go? Honestly, I don't expect them to finish any higher than they did last year. Fixture congestion is obviously a thing, but at the same time, teams have just gotten stronger this time around. Man City, Liverpool, and Arsenal are above the rest in my eyes. Spurs are cooking. Hard to tell if that's permanent or not. Man United and Newcastle will likely stabilize, meaning that the 5th, 6th, and 7th spot are where it will all be at. But who knows? I'm not a smart man, and you're listening to me. What does that make you? And then we have another aspect that takes the long term into consideration. Can they keep this up? In other words, how long can they even stay in the league? This might seem like it's a point that's coming out of left field for some of you, but trust me, it's definitely something worth discussing. Like I said, they've spent 6 consecutive seasons in the Premier League. That's impressive. But as we all know, teams that fall under a certain historical and revenue threshold are never really guaranteed anything. If we look at the teams in the Premier League right now, 13 out of 20 have played in the Championship in the past 11 years. The ones that haven't, the quote-unquote Big Six and Everton. And judging based on last year, Everton may be added to the drop list sooner rather than later. As for the clubs that have actually seen the drop, so much has gone wrong for them and their situations are so vastly different that it's hard to pinpoint one specific reason that explains all of this. Whether that is due to a lack of funds, player or financial mismanagement, being forced to sell their most promising staff and talent, a lack of adequate depth, or simply bad luck, it's very hard for teams to remain in the Prem. Look at Leicester City, promoted in 2014, champions in 2016, relegated in 2023. A heck of a 9-year run. Look at Blackburn Rovers, promoted in 92, champions in 95, relegated in 99. 7 years. Look, these are extreme examples, I'm well aware, but it also takes the extreme to succeed long term. If anything, these act as proof that when you play at the level that these guys are playing at, anything can happen. In the words of Tony Bloom, every year, 3 teams get relegated. So you can finish in the top half, as some teams have for 3, 4, 5, 10 years, but that doesn't mean you don't have one bad season and get relegated, or have a really bad season and get close. And there we have it. Let me know what you guys think about Brighton and their incredible run and progress. All the links to the socials are in the description. That's all from me today. Hope you guys enjoyed. Hope you're having a great day. Cheers, and I will catch you in the next one.